My name is Lauren Regan. I'm the Executive Director and Staff Attorney of the Civil Liberties Defense Center. We're located here in Eugene, and we defend activists and we sue police and government agencies for violations of federal civil rights laws, as well as police misconduct, brutality, however you want to describe it, racial profiling, discrimination. And we have been in existence for almost 12 years, and I've been practicing law in Eugene for about 18 years. And today we're having a community conversation about the right to video record police or audio record police. And this is an issue that has been getting a lot of national attention as well as local attention. And tonight I'm going to give a really brief presentation about your rights to videotape police. We're going to briefly talk about the draft Eugene policy about your right to record police. There is another policy that we're going to talk about that has to do with surveillance cameras in our commons, in our public areas, that actually just passed last week, and we're going to talk about that. And then we're hoping to open it up to a couple of videographers that have actually had unpleasant experiences with law enforcement while recording police. And we're going to open it up for discussion. Everyone can have a chance to have their voice heard or pose a question or a problem. We do have at least one person from the Eugene Police Commission here that will likely speak to us as well. The first thing to say is that public servants in public places performing their public duties don't have a right to privacy. None of us, when we're out in the public, has a right to privacy. We can be recorded, videotaped or audio taped without our knowledge when we're out in the world because we don't have an expectation of privacy when we're wandering around. The First Amendment allows us to be out there and assembling with each other. It allows us to burn the American flag, use profanity, advocate for the overthrow of government. All of those things are protected by the First Amendment. And we are allowed to record those acts through video or audio. The Fourth Amendment is your right to privacy. That's your right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, meaning the police do not have the right to just steal your property or search your person or your vehicle or your backpack without certain things happening. And then the 14th Amendment is your right to due process before taking your stuff or throwing you in jail. This just basically means that the Constitution requires that there is some fair process that you have to go through. An example of a violation of due process, in my opinion, is a no-fly list. You get placed on this list without your knowledge. There are no standards that the government uses to determine who gets put on these lists. There's no process for me to challenge that I'm on the list. There's no process to try to get off the list. And that's a pretty standard example of what due process does not look like. But your right to an arraignment, your right to an administrative hearing, your right to appeal a parking ticket. The reason we have those types of things are because of our right to due process. So why are we encouraging people, citizens, to videotape the police? Well, probably the number one reason is when you get into a court situation, if it's your word against a law enforcement officer's word, oftentimes juries, people are really kind of trained to believe that police are always telling the truth. And so if a citizen has a view that is contrary to the police officers, then oftentimes the jury will believe the police officer. And sometimes the only way to overcome that bias is by having hard evidence, like video. So when we're out on the streets, if we are observing police misconduct or harassment of a homeless person or what we believe is excessive force or even unprofessionalism, using slurs or derogatory language toward a person. All of those things, if captured on video, have been incredibly instrumental in holding police accountable and ensuring that the public remains safe, as well as to encourage better training and policies of police. Many of you probably heard on the news today, a couple days ago, an African-American man in Charlotte, South Carolina, was shot and killed by a white police officer. And the police officer indicated that this black man had stolen his taser and was threatening its use against him, and that he felt unsafe and had to shoot this man in the back several times. Well, today a citizen turned over their cell phone camera footage that captured the man getting pulled over for having a taillight out. And at some point he apparently fears for his safety and begins running away from the police officer, who then fires about a dozen rounds into his back and then walks up to the body and drops the taser next to the body. And today they indicted him for murder. One of the few police murders that we've seen in the United States this year where the police have actually been even just charged. Because of course they're not convicted at this point. We've just said that some kind of crime may have happened, and we want the jury system and the court system to review it and to determine, what the fair outcome is. And thus far, in the almost 100 police shootings that have occurred this year, to my knowledge, this is the first grand jury indictment that has happened. And it would never have happened but for this citizen coming forth with this video. Because otherwise, it just would have been the police officer's word against a dead person's word. And this police officer would have gotten away with murder. So, video footage is used in both criminal and civil cases. I recognize a few law students in the room, but the distinction is, criminal cases mean, you got arrested, you're being charged with a crime, maybe they say you, didn't use your turn signal when you were making a turn. Well, if somebody happens to capture that on video, you might be able to get exonerated from the crime, to be able to prove that you didn't do what the police have alleged that you did. And more often than not, in the civil context, that means, if someone got a beat down by the police, the police almost always claim the person was resisting arrest, or the person was attempting to assault the police officer, or something that would justify the police use of force against that person. The phrase use of force just means that there is a legal standard that says if I threaten a police officer with a certain level of force, he's allowed to use force on me. If I threaten them with something that amounts to deadly force, they're allowed to use deadly force on me. Police are one of the very, very few professions in this country that have the right to kill people. And with that right, of course, comes incredible responsibility as well. And use of force is one of the most common areas that we see where it is ripe for potential abuse, and it's very hard for the victims of such abuse to bring cases to court and to prove those claims. The flip side to this, of course, is that videotape of incidents like this can also be of assistance to the police themselves. If someone claims that a police officer clocked them in the face and the video clearly shows otherwise, then the police officer, can be exonerated in the same circumstance. As a side note, I just want to tell you that there have been a lot of calls for the use of badge cameras, that somehow the police having these badge cams as part of their uniform will make us all safer. But I think one thing that you need to realize is that the police officer controls the on and off button for the camera, and the camera is aimed at you, the citizen, not at what the police officer is doing. So that's not a foolproof system, and it's not the full solution to the problem of police misconduct. And then finally, LEO stands for Law Enforcement Officer. If a law enforcement officer knows that they are being recorded, or there is such an expectation that the citizens are whipping out their phones and recording these types of encounters with police, then it's likely that we may see an increase in professionalism by law enforcement. Clearly this police officer in South Carolina never expected that there was a citizen that happened to capture it on video. And so if more and more law enforcement officers come to the realization that they never know when one of us may be recording their conduct, hopefully it would increase their ability to deal with situations legally. And as I mentioned, accountability is one of the biggest reasons that we think that everyone should be a cop watcher or a videographer. Particularly in marginalized communities, whether that happens to be a transgender person or a Muslim person or a Latino person, those communities in general tend to have much more frequent contact with police. And often the encounters tend to be much more severe. I think, I don't need to go into detail. I'm sure everyone's heard and read about Black Lives Matter and just the disparate treatment of communities of color by law enforcement and the inherent biases that white police often have with regard to citizens of color. And so that could be a topic all of its own. So we hope that by encouraging people to videotape police, and particularly as allies to communities that may not feel as comfortable standing up to police or government agencies, that's an important way that we can help make all of our communities safer. And including harassment, cases of sexual assault and rape by police, or even just corruption. Somebody gets to go without a traffic ticket because they play golf with a particular police officer versus someone whose family member is in prison and the police have hated for a couple of generations. Those are just, examples of the way that we have seen corruption come forth in cases around the country, not necessarily specifically in Eugene. And I think the other thing that we hear from police around the country is that they don't like it when their children or their neighbors or their priests or people that they know watch them on video doing their job. Even if that job turns out later to have been improper or unconstitutional. The idea that at any time your conduct out on the streets as a police officer could be viewed by your children will hopefully increase the moral imperative of law enforcement. So it's critical when you capture something important on camera to get your footage to a safe place. There have been instances around the country where video have been deleted from people's phones, the phone has been crushed under someone's heel, a technology snafu occurs and you accidentally delete it. There are a number of ways nowadays that people can upload video straight from their phone to a cloud or to their email or something else. In the olden days, or when people are cop watching for mass protests, and they're still using real video cameras, or cameras like what we have in the back of the room today, they use chips still, or little discs, and we always encourage, if you've captured something that's really important, you need to switch out your chip and get that, to your car or to somewhere safe. In the event, not only damage, but we also don't want your camera seized by the police if you have just recorded evidence that might be safer in the hands of others. Obviously there is always the potential, if the footage that you take becomes evidence, that law enforcement could show up at your door with a subpoena for your tape. In some rare circumstances, they may even be able to take your phone or camera right there at the scene. They're not allowed to look at the contents of it, but they might be able to seize it and get a warrant to view it, unless you consent, of course. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we when we look at the Eugene City Ordinance. We encourage people to cop watch in twos. One person is kind of focused down in the camera, the other person is sort of looking around, making sure that you're going to stay safe. That police aren't rushing with someone off the side and you're going to knock you down. But also just being aware, if a police officer is beelining for you and the camera, it's time to get ready and not be taken by surprise by that. And you want to regularly say the time, the date, and the location of where you're filming. People encourage you to do that almost every 5 minutes, and that is so that your recording contains information that can be used in the event that it goes to court. I always tell people when I do these trainings, just always imagine that your footage is going to end up in a trial. And you may even need to be a witness as part of that trial. So you really don't want to narrate what's going on, especially when people use expletives or other language while recording. It makes it so that a jury would potentially not trust it as much. If they hear "goddamn cops" or something like that as you're filming, it makes it appear that you might have a bias or something. So it's better to remain as neutral as you possibly can, so that if you do end up going to court, you will be a better witness for that victim or that person. In Oregon, the state law encourages people to say, "I'm recording," when we're out in public recording. It's not a consent requirement. The police officer doesn't have to say, "Okay." In fact, the case law actually says that the police don't even have to actually hear you give that warning. And of course, the First Amendment would trump an Oregon law. And so if you are out in public, as I mentioned, there is no requirement for you to say, "I'm recording." If you want to play it on the safe side, you just need to say it into your recording device. As long as it's on tape, you would be covered there. I want to contrast that to private recordings. If I called someone on the phone and I'm recording the conversation, that's actually a crime in Oregon. Oregon is called a two-party consent state. Different states are one-party or two-party consent. Oregon is a two-party, which means when I'm calling a private person in the private realm, if I'm going to record it, I need to tell that other person that I'm recording it. If not, it's called surreptitious recording, secret recording, and basically if you had hoped to use it in court, it will be inadmissible. And again, that's like in the private domain. So another issue that sometimes comes up when people are recording police is when the police kind of surround a victim or a citizen and you're trying to film it and you can't really see. You are allowed to get as close as you can to the situation in a safe manner. If the police say you need to move back 5 feet, you need to move back 5 feet, or you might be subject to arrest. If the police say you need to travel to Timbuktu to try to get you away from filming it, you need to know that if you don't obey the command of that law enforcement officer, you may be subject to arrest. Now, you may have a very good defense in court, and you might not get convicted, but you might get a ride in a cop car nonetheless. We generally recommend that if the police are saying get back, and the situation doesn't involve deadly force, if it doesn't involve guns. Obviously, guns involve, there's a whole different standard. But if you see police harassing a person with a beer in their hand, and the police say get back, we generally recommend that you continue filming and you take small steps back until you are, 6 feet away from what's going on. That's generally deemed to be a reasonable distance. A lot of times people ask me, what is the number of feet that I have to stand back? And there is no, black and white number because it depends on what's going on. As I mentioned, if there's a gun involved, it's going to be a lot farther away than if it's just an open container. The other suggestion that we give is if you hold your camera or your phone over your head and point it downward, you can usually try to get an angle that will allow you to see into the center of that melee. Don't forget, if you are filming at night, you need light, or it will not be very helpful. And audio can sometimes be really important as well. Not as essential as the video, but in order to capture audio, obviously you need to be as close to the situation as possible. You want to try and film an entire incident. You don't want to start and stop your footage, because if you go to court, prosecutors will make a big deal out of the fact that there are gaps. What happened in these gaps? And it won't make for as strong evidence. Try not to shake your camera a bunch if possible. Try to use a wide-angle lens if you can. Try to get close-ups of badge numbers and names. Or if the police officers have somehow covered up their badge numbers and names, it's very important to film that as well, as that is a clear violation of police policy. And then don't forget to remain focused on the police actions. So in 2012, we had a federal case here in Eugene, Joshua Schlossberg versus Officer Soulsby of the Eugene Police Department. Josh was an activist that was filming the police. The police grabbed him, threw him to the ground, took his camera, started watching the footage. It went all the way through federal court, and ultimately the court ruled that he had the right to record, that the police officer did not have the right to take his camera and did not have the right to view the contents of it. In fact, Judge Coffin ruled that a cell phone or a camera are the equivalent of about 100 filing cabinets worth of documents. And if a cop would need a warrant to get into those filing cabinets, they need a warrant to get into the contents of your phone or your camera. Obviously, we would encourage you to use passwords on your phone to make that a little more difficult. If your phone or your camera does get seized, you should know that most police departments now have a forensic detective whose job is to work these computer programs in which they download the footage and then should be able to give you the camera and the footage back as soon as possible. Once they load it and have a copy for themselves, they can't just hold on to it because they don't want it going out to the public, which often happens, and you may need a lawyer for that to expedite that process.
What's the reasonable amount of time that they can hold it?
Probably 24 hours, depending on the situation. It only takes about 5 minutes for them to download this stuff, usually. There was a Department of Justice memo in 2012 that we have copies of that will be up on our website after this event that lays out basically everything that I'm explaining to you tonight. The Federal Department of Justice clearly came out and said that the public has a right to record police, that the police cannot intimidate videographers or attempt to harass them. They can't attempt to bully them into consenting to give up their footage, et cetera, et cetera. For those of you that are law students, you might want to take a look at that in detail. And then there are several other cases that have been instrumental in sort of framing this right to record police. Now I want to quickly turn to this draft police policy that is under review right now in the city of Eugene. As a result of the Schlossberg case, as well as that 2012 Department of Justice memo, police departments around the country are being forced to acknowledge that citizens have the right to record police. And they are drafting policies and training now to sort of make this real. And Eugene has policy 415, which you can get online. We have the URL that we'll give you in a second. The policy, by and large, follows the Department of Justice memo, but there are many differences in this policy and the federal policy that do still need to be addressed. There is still far too much discretion being given to the police, in my opinion, and some of the language is so vague and overbroad that it would likely be found unconstitutional if it were ever challenged. So basically the policy says that members of the public have a First Amendment right to record police in public places as long as the recording doesn't interfere with the officer's duty or the safety of officers or others. This is one of those areas that I think that language is probably a little too broad. Who gets to decide whether or not what you are doing is interfering with members of the public? Couldn't just mere presence be considered to be interfering? When people are getting arrested, they don't really love to have people around videotaping it. We actually had a case out of Salem where some folks got really irate at a citizen cop watcher. They didn't realize that the cop watcher was actually there for them, and the police ended up arresting the cop watcher because the cop watcher was making the suspects get uppity. They were getting aggravated and verbal, and the police just ended up arresting the cop watcher. And that case ended up getting thrown out, but the cop watcher still went to jail that night. And then it says officers should assume that they are being recorded at all times when on duty in public places, and where you can record. Basically, like I mentioned, public places where there is no expectation of privacy. That can also include your home. It can include a place of business or the lobbies or foyers of those places. City streets, sidewalks, parks, traditional First Amendment areas. Places where you have permission to be, or places where you are clearly not trespassed from being. So, you can't walk into the front door of my house because you see a police cruiser in front of it thinking that you have the right to record what's going on inside unless I invite you in or give you permission. The same is true if an area is marked off as no trespassing, like a secure area where a reasonable person would know that they shall not cross. You do not have the right to cross just simply to record. You would be subject to arrest. And then it says, you're not allowed to enter an established crime scene. Sometimes that's really obvious because they have that tape around that says crime scene. Other times there's no tape. And so again, I think this is a little bit broad because they need to have some language in there that says something like, if a reasonable person would know that they've walked into a crime scene area. Otherwise, just walking up on a scene with your camera could be potentially violating this, and would basically completely negate the purpose of this policy and these laws. This is further language. The stuff that is in purple are things that I personally have a little bit of a problem with, and I'll certainly be submitting my public comments on the draft ordinance, as should anyone else. But some of this language, breaching the reasonable distance established by the officer, gives a whole lot of discretion to a police officer who may not want to be recorded and may not want you to be recording what he's doing. Tampering with a witness who is being engaged by the police is me informing that person of their constitutional rights, tampering with that person. Many cop watchers have attempted to tell people that they have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and have been threatened with arrest as a result of doing so. There's a First Amendment problem with that, as well as a lot of other ethical and moral problems. What is an unreasonable question or an unreasonable interruption, which can divide the attention of the officer? We've seen many police officers that just standing there with a camera will start to make the police officer do this. And now they're going to claim that their attention is divided. They need to bring in more officers if that's the case. They can't just simply curtail your right to record. And then the last one, any action that jeopardizes the safety of an officer, victim, witness, suspect, or third party. Sure, I think, we can all kind of figure out what some examples of that will be, but that language is so vague. Jeopardizes the safety of a third party seems like a stretch. The police are not allowed to seize your recording device without your consent, or if they arrest you, obviously they're going to take you and everything you got in your hands to jail. And doesn't matter if you consent. But they're not, even if you are arrested, they may be able to take that phone or the recording device and put it in an evidence bag and zip it up, but they're not allowed to look at the contents of it without a warrant. And one interesting part of the Eugene draft policy is that if a police officer wants to seize somebody's camera because they think that it has evidence on it, number one, it has to be a serious crime. They do not delineate what is a serious crime versus a non-serious crime. But if the officer is going to take somebody's recording device, they have to bring down a supervisor. They have to bring a supervisor to the scene. So there is at least a little bit of a check and balance with regard to your Fourth Amendment seizure rights.
If they would seize it, it's your cell phone, and later get a warrant, is that warrant limited to what you were photographing then, or can they search your entire?
They're probably going to search the entire camera. In most police departments, they will have a forensic person who is not assigned to investigate the actual crimes or case, so they try to make it appear that this person is sort of neutral and walled off from the other police officers, so that they would extract what is relevant only and share that with police, and the other contents would be deemed irrelevant. But, so what's missing from the policy, and the Department of Justice memo that I mentioned includes a specific reference that police officers, cannot threaten or intimidate people who are recording police. Not only do we need that included in the policy, but we also should talk about the need for training of police officers to make sure that they are aware of these new rules. And like I mentioned, there is some pretty vague language throughout that needs to be tightened up, in my opinion. A lot of times, cops, while they are focused on something, whatever it may be, serious or non-serious, they often just say, "Get back, get back." That is a very vague command. What does get back mean? If you get back 5 feet and then you're arrested because you didn't get back enough, is that a lawful arrest? So we want to make sure that the police are trained and recognize that they need to use language in a reasonable manner. So a couple of things. If you are detained by the police are telling you you are not free to leave, they're only allowed to detain you if they believe you've committed a crime or are about to commit a crime. If you are interacting with the police, whether you are videotaping them or otherwise, first thing you should probably do is take a deep breath. Make sure you're in control of your actions and words. You're probably in a situation where there's a lot of adrenaline on both the police and the participants' points of view. So you want to keep yourself safe. You want to make sure that your hands are visible at all times. Police get very nervous if you start putting your hands in your pockets or you're fiddling around with things. If you need to reach for something or do something while interacting with the police, we kind of recommend that you narrate it. Like, I am reaching over to get my wallet and to take my driver's license out. We've all read about the cases where people have gotten shot and killed by the police for reaching for their cell phones and other things like that. A safe way to try to limit the risk of that is to just talk to the police and tell them what you're doing with your hands before you do it. Debating the cops is not usually an effective tactic when you're out on the streets. If you do run into a situation where you believe that they're telling you to do something unreasonable, like go across the street in order to record, your best bet is to probably obey the police order for now, make sure you get that badge number and the name, and then report that police officer through the citizen complaint process or some other way to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Obviously, if you don't do that, you may very likely be taken to jail. Now your footage is definitely in the hands of the police, and now you need to defend yourself in court, which is probably not what you wanted to do as a videographer. You want to never run or physically resist the police. Even as a videographer, you never want to run up on a scene. You know, you can only imagine what might happen if you see the police, you know, physically manhandling someone and you start running with your camera toward that situation. You know, I mean, that could literally be life or death for you under certain circumstances. So you always want to walk. You never want to run. And if the police put hands on you, it's never legal to physically resist the police, even if what they're doing is illegal. It will likely only get you charged with crimes and possibly injured as well. If the police do attempt to detain you and you ask, you know, am I being detained? And they say, well, no, but we want to talk to you, we want to see your camera. You know, under those circumstances, you should ask if you're free to leave. And if you are, put some distance between you and the police so that you don't have further problems. In Oregon, we are not required to carry identification. We do not have to provide our driver's licenses to law enforcement in Oregon unless you are the driver of a car and you just got stopped while driving. Otherwise, in Oregon, if you are being detained, meaning if the police say that you've committed a crime or you're about to commit a crime, if they say, yeah, you're detained, and you say why, and they say theft, then under those circumstances, you do have to provide law enforcement with your name, address, or date of birth. Nothing else. Not your social security number, not your immigration status, nothing else is required. If you are being detained, they can also now do what's called a pat-down search, where they are supposed to be only looking for weapons. So they're not supposed to be whipping out your wallet to look at the ID you didn't want to show them. They're only supposed to be looking at places within your wingspan where a weapon could be hidden or used against them. And, you know, like I said, if you are videotaping, make sure that you're doing that date, time, location regularly. We also, you know, encourage people to get down on their computer after an incident and just sort of write up a narrative just in the event that technology fails us. The police are not allowed to move you from where they find you, you know, so unless you're under arrest. So if the police walk up to you and say, hey, could you walk down this dark alley, we want to ask you a few questions, you have the right to say no. They have to question you where they have found you, and obviously being around people and in a lit location is preferable. And if you don't assert your rights, if you don't say, I don't consent, you know, if they want to take your camera, you need to say, I don't consent. If they want to arrest you, you need to assert your Fifth Amendment right and say, I want to remain silent and I want a lawyer. That's, you know, your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Just as, this isn't a Know Your Rights training, obviously, but just so you know, you never have to answer a question put to you by a police officer or anyone. The only person that can force you to answer a question is a judge in a courtroom. So if you're ever wondering whether you really have to answer something, the answer is always no. You have the right to remain silent. And that's not to say that there aren't a ton of reasons why you would, you know, want to report a crime or talk to a cop. We're just saying that, you know, in the event that you don't want to, you have the right to say no and assert your Fifth Amendment right. And that is the invocation of Fifth Amendment rights. I want to remain silent and I want an attorney. When you say that, it puts a magic bubble around you. The cops are no longer allowed to question you legally. So the other policy that I just want to briefly mention before we open this up is Policy 606, which apparently was just passed by the City of Eugene, called the Public Safety Camera System Pilot. Big Brother is watching. The City of Eugene has approved this policy to put cameras in all of the public areas of downtown Eugene. They will be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, recording everything that goes on down there. Now, of course, they have assured us that it's only for legitimate reasons and won't be used to invade your privacy or anything like that. But this policy, in addition to the fact that you know, most of these computer software programs also have facial recognition software attached with them, there really is no right to be unsurveilled by law enforcement in downtown Eugene at this time. Apparently there is still comment available on this policy, and I would strongly encourage anyone who thinks there still is a right to privacy in the world to comment on that. It's an 18-month pilot program, but of course, as with most pilot programs, they almost always become permanent. As I mentioned, they are apparently going to deter crime. Lots of places have tried these types of policies. I think London was one of the first to go public with cameras everywhere, but it's like a needle in a haystack. The cops get so much data and so much video that it's almost impossible for them to actually make relevant use of it. And these are real-time cameras, so apparently there is going to be police officers or employees of some sort sitting in front of these screens 24 hours a day, monitoring what goes on there. There have been several cases around the country where abuse of these cameras have been used, where police have, pirated some of the video into their private possessions. There were a couple of instances of women being stalked by police as a result of camera footage. So I'm not a big fan of this, as you might be able to tell. The footage will be kept for 30 days.
Are these hidden cameras, or they have to be noted? We have to know where they are?
As you can read, they claim that they are going to put up signs saying that this area is under video surveillance. I don't know exactly how accurate those signs are going to be with regard to the location of the cameras. I also don't know whether or not the locations of the cameras will be made public. Those are the devil in the details, I think is the thing. So, the next police commission meeting is actually the day after tomorrow, April 9th. They meet the second Thursday of every month. There is a 3-minute public comment period for any member of the public that wants to go and share their thoughts.
Per person.
Per person, thank you, Carol. It should be, related to something relevant to the police commission. And if you can't make it to that meeting, or you aren't comfortable getting up in front of the police commission and testifying, that is the email address of the police commission, kind of administrator. They call him an analyst, but he will be able to get the comments to all of the different police commissioners as well. And we really do encourage the public to chime in on this. I don't know how many of you heard that this was happening. Probably not very many of you. If you want to look at the actual text of either of the policies that we mentioned tonight, this is the city's website. You just go to their website, click on departments, click on police, and then you'll see the actual text of these policies. I did bring copies if anybody wants to come up afterward and check them out. And with that, that is the end of my little formal presentation. Now we're going to open it up to discussion. Joe, I don't know if you would like to lead off the discussion?
Well, I sort of...
So Joe Tyndall is one of our Eugene police commissioners, and I met him through Occupy Eugene.
So, I guess Lauren and I had a conversation plus an email, and in it she asked me to talk about a bunch of stuff, which is all of these things right there. So, I'll try to be brief, but sort of cover this stuff. I'll probably do a quick disclaimer, and that is that I do not speak for the police commission. Okay, I'm here as an individual, and if I don't do, so there's a question, why would I make that? And that's because there's a lot of people on the police, there's a lot of diversity of opinion on the police commission, and so there are some people who will not like, on the commission, will not like what I have to say. However, there's also two other members here. There's Bill Whalen over there, and Jesse Lorkey right there.
And one more, a new one.
Oh yeah, I didn't notice you yet. We have a new commissioner who's just replaced Juan Carlos, who left a couple months ago. And welcome, I didn't see you come in.
What's her name?
Raquel Hack.
Raquel Hack, yes.
Great.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I've done my
She's an
disclosure.
immigration lawyer here in Canada.
I am really pleased that you got brought to the commission. I think it's going to be great. Okay, so the commission, actually there are 12 people on the police commission. There are 8 commissioners as such, 2 city councilors, a person from the Civilian Review Board, and the Human Rights Commission. So 8 regular members and 4 additional people. The 8 members are recommended to the city council by the mayor. And one of the reasons I'm telling you this is because currently is the period in which they're recruiting new police commission members. There is one person who is terming out, so there's one open space on the police commission. It's a 4-year term. You can do 2 of them, so a total of 8 years, and then you're done. The place to go to find out about that, and I absolutely encourage everyone in this room who is at all interested in doing this kind of thing to do it. It's an opportunity to sit at the table. You do get a chance to influence policy. Now, my personal experience is getting outvoted a lot, but at least the voice is there. And at least, you know, and I can look at things over the past 3 years that I've been able to get policies changed a little bit, you know, to, I think, be a good deal better. So it's an opportunity to do this. Okay, so that's the commission itself. Basically, you go up to the city website, just like she had the link up here, and you go to commissions, and there will be a link that says they're recruiting open positions. You fill out a form. It takes probably about 20 minutes, and what will happen is they'll review it. You'll be invited in for an interview, and with the group that will interview you, then some recommendations will be made, and Kitty Piercy will have a personal interview with you, and she'll make a recommendation to the city council, and then you are approved, or whoever is approved for that becomes the commissioner. Okay, so city recruiting. So I guess the next thing was this policy 415, which is the thing about videotaping the police. I was sort of asked, where in the process is that? And it's probably not going to be voted on this month, or there will be a vote, and it probably will be tabled to the future. There are a couple of sticking points. Lauren brought up the issue of the safe distance. That's a real concern, and it's been the focal point of a lot of discussion on the commission about this, is how, who has that discretion, what constitutes a safe distance. And the term that's usually used is the totality of the circumstances. So again, if there's someone with a gun, okay, you want to be a good deal further away than if, it's just a quiet conversation between a couple of people. So one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that the police do, when they're out there, they're sort of looking around for potential threats. And so, as more and more people come to the scene, that makes them feel a good deal less safe. So that's something you need to keep in mind when you're videotaping.
And the reverse could be said to be true as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm not, I'm saying, it's just a situation where there's the potential for conflict. So in general, we want to, keep that in mind, and don't precipitate the conflict. Okay, so currently the safe distance thing, we're going to argue about that, I think, a little bit more. But the two things that are still sticking for me are towards the end of the current policy, and it has to do with confiscation and the potential for fishing expeditions. In other words, if the police pick up your camera, okay, and confiscate it, that's an extrajudicial punishment. In other words, they are choosing to punish you because many people, their whole lives are on a cell phone. And if that cell phone is taken from them, that's a huge inconvenience. Plus, of course, you have to go about trying to get it back. And the second thing is, if you got nude selfies on it, okay, they're going to be looking. So the question is there a fishing expedition to get you for something else? And there is a concern there. I see a hand going up. Yeah.
Okay, one of the things that comes to my mind is the metadata that's going in with all these recordings. So anything that you record with the digital camera, your video camera, or your cell phone, it's got the time and date stamp built into it. And I think that as far as if they confiscate my camera, the technology's there where they can say we need stuff from this point A to point B, and that's it, which shuts everything else out. And they're ignoring it because that's there. The technology's there. There's no reason they should be looking at my selfies if they're looking for a video that I did at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night.
We're agreed, but unfortunately, as the policy is currently written, that's not being limited. So that's an area where I'm going to be spending my time arguing that there needs to be stricter language in there for a policy of this nature. Okay, that's, so fishing expeditions and confiscation. Now, it is good that if an officer says they want to confiscate a camera, that they do have to bring a supervisor in. So, in other words, you've got a second opinion, someone a little bit higher with a good deal more training, and they're more likely to sort of say, well, maybe we don't need it. So I think that's a good thing, having a supervisor be required, but I don't think that it's sufficient. That's my opinion, and we'll argue about it on Thursday. Okay, confiscation, sticking point, safe distance I've talked about. Okay, cross that one off. Okay, so Lauren did mention meetings. It's every second Thursday. We do not have a meeting during August, but all the other meetings are public. You're welcome to attend, and I would encourage you to attend. There's very few people who ever come by to attend. I mean, Carol is a regular, and she really needs to, and she speaks. There's a public comment period right at the beginning, so if you want to say something and you need to leave, that's great. Just come, say what you need to say, and then you're free to go.
And Jessica comes every month too.
That's true. Jessica's pretty regular. So, second Thursdays, meetings. Okay, and it's at, for those of you who are interested, it's at the police department. There's a big conference room on the first floor, and that location of that is 300 Country Club Road. It's basically on the north side of the river going west from Coburg Road. That's Country Club Road is the one that sort of parallels the river. Okay? Let's see. So the next thing on here, was the 606.2, the public safety cameras. Now that's a pilot project. I have really mixed feelings about that kind of thing, and I think I agree to a large degree with Lauren. I think the thing that the police are, there's people on the commission who say, oh, if this police video solves one crime, it's totally worth it. I think what's going to happen is it's going to be very expensive, very difficult to use. They're going to have huge amounts of data, and they're not going to be able to figure out how to store it, or to index it, or to figure out what's going to be on it. And so I think they're going to get bitten by their desire to do this thing. So that's my belief as to what's going to happen. Because now if they're going to start storing 10 or 15 cameras for a month, suddenly you're talking about a stack of disk drives, okay, with a lot of data, and the question is who's going to watch that? And they're going to start realizing that it's going to cost them overtime and extra people, and so they're going to have to adjust the policies because of that.
Couldn't it also be said that it, is likely intended to be targeting unhoused people or lower income people?
I think that there is some of that going on. I don't think it's the complete problem. The main area that they're looking at, for those of you who know, is the Bermuda Triangle. It's that the Davis and those other, the Horsehead and those other bars in that kind of area.
Are they going to tell us where the cameras are located, or at least what the region is?
Well, the thing about it, there's been some sort of public discussions in the police commission, but I've also met with some of the folks who are working on this privately on this. There are already cameras out there recording the public in a lot of the businesses in the area have video footage. So part of this whole process is going to be finding out who's taking video. So what the current thinking is is that what they'll do is if there is a crime, they will go find the cameras that have footage on them so that they can get some information about a crime. If there's a fight or anything else. Yeah, Carol?
How many businesses have cameras behind their darkened windows? I understood McDonald Theater did for years and other places. Are you tracking all that, or?
I'm not doing it personally.
I meant Commissioner.
But I've been sort of asking for that information, and I'm told that most of the businesses down there do have cameras.
Like they're behind windows that aren't so readily
Yeah,
noticeable,
exactly.
correct?
And,
Right.
and so they're recording, so to some extent they're looking, they don't have the ability to do real-time monitoring. That's just, it just doesn't exist yet. If they start to ask for that authority, I think we have a different set of problems. But that's not what I'm seeing at the moment yet. Yeah, we have a question here?
I just learned about those on the public broadcasting, some of these British TV crime dramas. So let's go see the footage, and I realized, oh, they really have that. One of the dangers that I think make people think more about this is foreign students in the United States. I don't know if people remember seeing pictures of Iranian students wearing masks at a demonstration in Washington, D.C. because the agency of Iran, Saba, had thousands of agents around the world to monitor the political activities of their students, and it was true of the KCIA. There are a number of governments of all political persuasions that are very concerned about what their overseas citizens are doing and would have a lot of money to bribe officers or whatever to try to make sure that they know or discourage any of the people who come to America and enjoy the benefits of education and exposure to some good American values, maybe some bad ones, but that's it's been an important thing. And we are a major university, we have a foreign student clientele, and they should be encouraged to enjoy their democracy and not have to worry about these intelligence agencies that are not sympathetic to our values of free speech.
One of the things that was brought up was facial recognition. And we basically have a pledge from Chief Kearns that they will not use facial recognition software. In my opinion, our police, or at least the command staff in our police department, is a fairly reasonable group of people, and I generally trust them. They haven't given me, over 3 years that I've been working with most of these people, they've given me no reason not to trust them. Okay, let me just put it that way. So I don't think we're going to be playing that set of games. Let's see, anti-bias. Yeah, we've been talking about a number of things. There's body-worn video stuff. The cameras, Warren brought some of that up. There's a policy, it hasn't been completed, but there is still work going on that. There's, we did pass an anti-bias-based policing policy, and I'm sort of very happy with the result of it. We were able to add in wording that said you could not discriminate against people based on their economic circumstances. And that took a fair amount of effort to get that wording in, given that there are a number of conservatives on the police committee. So I think that's about all the notes that I have.
Well, you can chime in here if something comes up. Thanks for being here. Okay, so anybody else want to get in on this discussion?
I just had a question for you, and that is, I was looking at your, some of the things you had issue with in terms of the wording of the policy, and I was wondering, would it be possible for you to draft?
Oh, yes.
Wording?
Yeah, I'll be submitting comments.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes. Yes.
If you don't have a camera, what about just being a concerned citizen and observing? It would be a credible witness.
Sure, that's fine.
At one time, that's what people did before.
Right,
they
right.
pulled the citizens.
Mr. Anti-Technology over here.
Good witness.
Yep, that's perfectly fine, especially if you have a piece of paper and you can jot down some notes while you're there.
I was just going to add to address the question that was over there earlier. There was a Supreme Court case last year, Riley v.
Louder?
California. Riley v. California, maybe you can address it. But basically, the Supreme Court ruled that cops need a warrant to search your cell phone and any attendant metadata. And if they go outside of that, then basically everything gets tossed out. So maybe you can elaborate some more.
So that's a circumstance where you, the owner of the metadata, are charged with a crime, And the courts ruled that evidence would be inadmissible in court under those circumstances. Briley versus California. Yeah, okay.
I'm a little surprised after the Josh Schlossberg matter that you so wonderfully worked on that there wasn't a policy recommended then. That was some years ago. Do you have any insights as to that? Because I think that would have served our community. Other communities across the nation have policies that guide officers. Any thoughts on that, Lauren?
Well, I think that it would have been good for them to have taken the federal judge's order into account. They, as far as I know, did not have any other arrest circumstances similar to his since his case in 2012. But I think that our case paired with the Department of Justice memo that came out that same time period is probably what did precipitate the matter that's under review now. My understanding, maybe you even told me this, was that this policy was not on the Police Commission's work plan for this year, that they took it sort of out of turn, or they added it to the work plan
commendably,
maybe as a result of Carol's advocacy efforts.
Yeah, basically, in November, we had 3 very serious cases where the police objected to being videotaped. And as a result of Carol bringing that to the Commission's attention, the policy has moved forward. So let's just say that the leadership of the Police Commission was not happy about that, but it is moving forward.
Carol, can you briefly outline those 3 cases?
Well, public speaking sort of terrifies me. I'll make this real short. Yes, there were 3 cases that I observed at Eugene Municipal Court over a period of about 3 weeks. I've been going pretty much every day for 5 years. And the common theme was that the people involved, after their court matters, expressed to me their deep-seated beliefs that they had experienced police retaliation, punishment, retribution, because either they or a passenger were trying to record the police contact. It was troubling. So at the December meeting of the Police Commission, I suggested that they do pursue a policy. I was a little startled that Eugene EPD, didn't have such a policy. I'm so glad that the commissioners unanimously voted to further this in some way. And all of you folks can have an effect on this too if you want to share your thoughts. But there were 3 cases, and one was the most egregious. A gentleman was tasered multiple times within 45 seconds of the initial police demand that he step back, and he complied. A second demand, he complied. At the 3rd demand, he said, words to the effect, he'd be out of range. He was tackled and tasered 3 times, and that trial had a visceral effect on me. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Carol. Any other questions or comments?
In the beginning of this thing, you said something about an expectation of privacy. There's no expectation of privacy out in a public area, such as the Bermuda Triangle. How would you reconcile that with your objection to surveillance?
To Big Brother, yeah. Well, I think there's a saying that those who give up liberty for security get neither. I just think that, we don't have an expectation out in public. I could be watching you, you could be watching me. I could be taking a picture of that door, and there's going to be 4 people that are going to be in my picture. That's one thing. I think it's very different to set up systematic cameras by the government used to surveil the citizenry constantly. Intermittent or occasional, being photographed or videotaped out in the public domain, that's just, a reality of being in a crowded planet. But the idea that 24/7 constant monitoring, it just seems like a sci-fi, Orwellian sort of situation to think about people sitting in front of computer monitors with badges on, watching our every move as we transgress the downtown zone. That's my own personal opinion.
Do you mind if I follow up?
Sorry. Yeah.
How would you feel if the videotape was put on a big bank for everyone to see downtown. Keep in mind, of course, that the zoning in the public domain, there's no cameras inside our houses. And there were cameras inside the police department where we could watch the police watching the video.
I think I can think of a lot of better uses of our time, money, and energy. And I'm not sure it's going to necessarily reduce the amount of actual crime that will be enforced or prosecuted. And I think the flip side to this is that they could be 24/7 recording, but we have a district attorney's office that's not even taking property cases. They're so understaffed. The city prosecutor's office has one full-time prosecutor and they're supposed to have like 35. You know, I mean, so what's going to happen with all this evidence and all these crimes? Nothing. Anything else? Or does anybody want to respond to that?
It's not a response. I have a question for the commissioner who spoke. I really appreciate the pledge that was made to not use facial recognition software or discriminate on people based on their economic status. But I feel like it's not unheard of that people in position of power have broken pledges and promises. So I'm wondering if that has any teeth attached to it, if there's any repercussions that happen if that promise is to be broken.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'm Jesse Lorky, I'm on the police commission, and the facial recognition and license plate readers was huge to me. I've been pushing on that from the beginning. I think we've got two big concessions on this. One is it's not going to be monetary. So it's not going to be worth pulling the video unless something substantial happened. The other was no facial recognition, no license plate readers. That should be in the draft policy that ends up being out there, from what I understand. This is an 18-month draft policy. Ultimately, the city council has got the ability to say, yeah, we want this, or no, we don't. There's a ton of room for public comment, and this is still in motion and not done by any means yet. So the police commission voted to adopt it. That's where it's at right now, unless the city council's done something I don't realize. But there is a lot of room here. It's not over.
So Jesse, are you saying that in the current draft of policy 606, that language about no facial recognition is in it?
5 minutes before the vote, police chief assured that it was going to end up being in it, but we voted on it as it was and what you probably have.
Okay. So the current version, as I understand it, doesn't have that language in it, but you're saying by the time it gets final approval, that language will be part of it?
It seemed like that was what was going to happen.
So now you all have homework assignment, your public comments, make you focus on that. Yeah, Art?
Is there an estimated price tag attached to this?
Not yet. And I think they are underestimating the cost horribly. And so
Has there been any numbers thrown out?
Well, there have, but they're so out of line. I mean, one of the things that they're looking at is a storage system that could potentially run $400,000, which I think is obscene.
Well, hold on, let's let the other commissioner, it looks
Yeah,
like
go
he
ahead.
might have an answer.
I just want to make Jesse's comment. Actually, I just pulled up the draft 606, and it says right before 606.3.2, the public safety camera system will not be used in conjunction with any facial recognition software. It's in the policy.
Okay,
All right.
That way.
Thank you, Mr. Whalen.
Okay, well, so it doesn't sound like we have a clear price tag. Will the public be afforded the right to review the cost to taxpayers for this program before it is actually implemented as a pilot program? Do any of you know?
Through the city council.
Okay.
You don't really need facial recognition. I know as a child in the age of technology that when I leave my home till the time I get home and I don't want at least 15 different cameras in various places. This is more targeted towards people. From life experience and sociology 101, blackness comes with an assumption of criminality. You don't need to have facial recognition to target black and brown folks or minorities with this system. And I want to know if there are any fail-safes in place to make sure that the people who are going to be monitoring these cameras don't fall into that.
I mean, the bias policy only dealt with economic issues, it sounded like, not race.
No, the bias policy goes race, sexual orientation, gender, essentially the whole list. But economic status was not a protected class in Eugene.
Right.
Therefore, it took a little extra effort to get that put in.
I see. You were saying it was in addition to.
Yeah, that was a rather nasty little battle.
Well, I think the point is a good one in that we live in such a predominantly white community that people of color are going to be potentially more of interest to these monitors than the other 95% of people walking by these cameras. How do we have any assurance that the inherent institutional bias of racism that's so predominant in law enforcement and legal matters altogether will be, I don't know, respected or paid attention to? I don't want to put you on the spot, Joe, if anybody else wants to chime in.
It's an excellent question, and I think the way to answer it is to say that the police commission, first of all, it's only advisory. We don't really have any power. We advise the city council, we advise the city manager, we advise the police chief, and that's it. So it's a kind of a go-between between the public and those officials that work there. I think that the issue is that the police commission is a political body. There are different people holding different viewpoints. There is a slight conservative majority right there. There's a tendency, for example, on the 606.2 policy, I don't remember exactly how many commissioners were in the room at the time. There were, whatever that number was, subtract 2 objections and 2 abstentions. And that was what passed it. It was a majority to pass it, and so it went on. And there is numerically people who believe that these camera systems are going to make them safe there's a majority of those people. And they are going to vote for this stuff, and the rest of us are going to get outvoted. So going back to what I said earlier, there is an open seat coming up. Put your names in. Get in there. Get a seat at the table. That is how you have an impact on this kind of stuff. If a conservative majority continues on here, we are going to go down this slippery slope.
Go ahead.
I want to know if any other government agencies would have access to this database.
My review of the policy indicated that it said that it could be available for legitimate law enforcement purposes, which I would imagine would mean federal, state, or other related agencies. Is that correct, commissioners?
Yeah, and there is also a clause in there for other city officials.
Other city officials?
Other city officials.
Meaning
They could use facial recognition software.
Huh?
Would they be able to use facial recognition software on that?
Well, actually, the way the policy is set up, if a request is made, it must be approved, I believe, by the police chief before the footage is released, and only in certain cases and to certain people.
I think the word was "quote unquote" legitimate.
Yeah.
Charles?
I just want to briefly respond to Commissioner Tyndall's comment about that the police commission is diverse, ranging from conservatives, liberals, in between. I agree with that, but it just underscored to me that happiness I felt that despite the wide diversity, it was a unanimous vote from the entire commission to further and look into a policy to guide officers when encountering civilians. So I think it's wonderful that 4 commissioners came tonight and their staffer, Mr. Cleverson here. It does show that they truly are interested in hearing from their community, and I thank them.
All right. Anybody else? I just want to make sure that the new face did not end up. But go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm as much concerned with the illegitimate access to the data. It's like if Edward Snowden can get all kinds of data, and other people can steal it from the most secure places, how do we know that this data isn't accessible to the various governments, even our own government, that is not governed by open rules, either through money or computer software. I mean, look at the cyber wars between China and the United States. People blamed Israel and Iran and so on. What are the safeguards for foreign intelligence and even intelligence of black agencies in our own government against us from this large storage of data? And that is my biggest concern.
Well, I guess the only thing I would say to that is, you know, it sounds like from the discussion that in addition to worrying about government surveillance video, it sounds like there's a lot of private capitalist corporate entities that also are, you know, recording us constantly without our knowledge as well. So
yeah.
Well, it sounds like we're kind of closed in the privacy realm.
And those type of people will look at things that we may not think significant. So, oh, well, the person went into a bookstore, but to some other country, to them, that's like line jump for execution or something, you know? Like, you never know.
All right, yeah.
Should individuals be worried about being profiled or retaliated against by this surveillance thing? Like suppose someone films the cops and it's late at night and he urinates against the wall because there are no bathrooms. Should he worry about being filmed and possibly getting a citation in the mail a few days later? Is that feasible? Or?
I don't think it's feasible, and I don't think that at this current stage that it's the intent to do that kind of thing. Because if you have continuous video, somebody has to watch it, and that's, you know, otherwise, and they just don't have the staff to do it at this point. So the goal, as it's been expressed, is that if a crime is committed, they would like to be able to go retrieve the information from the camera and have video of the events. It's an after-the-fact system. You know, again, I think it's problematic, but there are people who see a lot of value in being able to go and get that as evidence.
My only contrary to that is that, you know, the policy does specifically say that it is monitoring behavior activity, not just criminal activity. It also says that it will provide the following benefits: assist in identifying, apprehending, and prosecuting offenders, assisting in gathering evidence for criminal and civil court actions. Not sure what that is. Assist emergency service personnel in maintaining public order through deterrence. That seems to me like sweeping homeless people out of downtown. Assistance in monitoring pedestrian and vehicle traffic activity, not criminal activity, but just activity. Assistance in improving the general environment and security on public streets. Assistance in providing effective services to the community. So, I don't know, it sounds a lot broader, but, you know, and I guess maybe what I will say, my own conclusion, and we'll let Jana be the last to speak, is, you know, policies are just words on paper. The reality is that whether they are enforced, whether there is training, you know, how they're actually going to be implemented, that can be an entirely different can of worms. So we can have the best policy in paper, and if the police department is not on board with it, or if there is not adequate training or explanation to them, then it, you know, it is really just words on paper. It may give me a better hook to file civil actions in federal court on occasion, but I'm not sure that it will necessarily make a big difference in the community unless there is some teeth to it, and you and the police are, and the unions are willing to get on board with that.
I guess I just wanted to express one concern, because I went to the last police commissioner meeting about this, and the police officer that said he was helping draft this thing actually expressed like this desire to have people's footage if they're filming something. He thinks that he might wish that he had their footage. He actually said that in the meeting, and so I guess I'm wondering how many protections are in place about that. I know that they, you know, the security, the supervising officer comes and stuff, but it seems like at least that man definitely had an intention, And it didn't seem like he was recognizing my camera as my personal property and something that he would maybe covet if he thought I had something he wanted. So I just thought that was important and that people should know that that was actually said by somebody who was helping, you know, create the draft of the bill. And it was a police officer.
That was a police officer?
Yeah, he is, you know, he's a police officer who's helping with the bill and said that in the meeting. And that was probably one of my biggest concerns.
Yeah, well, I think that just reinforces the point I just made.
Exactly, I just thought people should know it's been said out loud by the police there.
Lauren, the staffer assigned for that was Sergeant Matt Lowen, and I could go back and look at the recording of that because I'm trying to remember what was said. But there was a sergeant that rounded up lots of policies, and one in particular, and his name's Sergeant Matt Lowen. You can go on the website of the Police Commission just to check out what Jen is sharing.
And he would be considered a supervisor, right?
Well, he's a sergeant. I'm not sure what he's. What? You know anything German? But he is the analyst for the commission.
I'd like to address the issue of intimidation. When the police are photographed, there is some issue like, well, that maybe controls me to some degree. But I think police have a need to have that kind of issue because sometimes the performance of their duties, they do lose control and they need to, you know, internally examine that. But as far as photographing citizens in general, I think it will intimidate me to a degree. We have a right to assemble, but the more you're being camera and the more you're being intimidated, that undermines the whole idea that we can collect together. And that's the one thing I think the major part of it. It will intimidate citizens just to get together if they have to maybe demonstrate. They want to down at City Hall, they want to demonstrate. But there'll be some intimidation to do that. I don't want them to, you know.
Yes, good point.
Well, along with many other people who have voiced something here, I'm concerned with the opportunities for abuse of these video data well beyond their intended function. And so I'm wanting to know what mechanisms there are for civilian oversight to make sure that, for example, these things are erased after 30 days without exception. And if there are any applications from any other police or foreign intelligence agency or federal intelligence agency, how is that mechanism working? How is that request processed? And who will approve it? And what civilian oversight there is for that?
I think those would make excellent comments to be submitted to make sure that they're part of the process of considering this as it moves forward. I'm not sure, is there an answer to that? Okay.
Not really, it's the same thing. Thursday night, come talk to us, you know, make your feelings known.
Well, and after the fact, of course, you could use the public records laws to, you know, I would assume that there's some form of an audit or an annual report of some kind that would be produced within the city on the effectiveness, particularly because it's a pilot program. There's going to have to be some form of evaluation done on it, and that should be subject to public records.
After the first 90 days, anyway.
And all of the police commission meetings are recorded. So there are videotapes, they're up on the city website, and you can watch any one of them. You know, Jeremy is the one who does the recording, and they've been, you know, real good about getting them up there quickly. So.
However, they no longer record the Civilian Review Board meeting, so if you want to attend that monthly meeting, you might want to bring your own camera. Executive decision made by the police auditor. Just thought I'd share that.
All right, we'll have you the last, and then feel free to mingle and talk amongst yourselves. We did bring a bunch of Know Your Rights brochures and other handouts from the Civil Liberties Defense Center if anybody needs or wants one of those. We do regular trainings, Know Your Rights trainings too, if anyone's interested. And you can be our ending voice.
Okay. I've been going to the police commission meetings for other reasons, but the thing that's so obvious is every time you start talking about these cams, they don't want to talk about budget. As Joe kind of alludes to, when they figure out what's going to cost or what they want to do, I don't think the city council is going to be the budget. It's going to be, I would say, a minimum of $100,000. Joe is saying $400,000. So, yeah, if it's $400,000, they can take that same money and put some guys down on bicycles. There's a lot more bang for their buck. So, but we'll see what happens.
All right, well, Vanessa? Okay, you be the last one.
Okay, I don't think they'll have to go to city council for that specific kind of line item from budget. I think they'll be able to use money that will be in the police department part of the budget and other grants and stuff they'll get for it. And I believe that the downtown camera thing was already approved by city council several years ago when they approved the 12-point downtown public safety plan. It included cameras downtown, and they said, oh, we'll put that on hold till we find some money for it. And so, and the police department part of the budget, I understand, is really not very transparent at all. So don't expect that to be discussed by the city council.
All right. Well, with that, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.